how did Khauf happen, Smita? Like, what inspired the concept of Khauf, and how did you approach writing fear into screenplay?
We are always told as first-time writers that you have to, it'll be better if you write something that you know. And I wanted to write about, I hadn't seen the experience of young women in a city like Delhi, and I wanted to capture that. And when I kind of went into a free-flowing drama series, that was one option, the other was a film. And I quickly realized that the most powerful feeling, the feeling that I could narrow down to was fear. And therefore, the idea of integrating that story of a young woman who comes to a city like Delhi, entering the gig economy, where does she live, how does she live, I felt that, okay, this has to be horror. And the idea was to kind of go so deep into that sense of fear, which is rooted in your everyday experiences. It's not like you are abandoned on a ship or you are in a haunted bungalow or there is something else. It's like there is a merging of what real horror is and also what is actually there in that room. So that was the idea.
Awesome. And as you said, you've written different scripts, different screenplays, and horror is something very different from all other ones, right? What different or unique challenges does horror have when it comes to VFX? Because you know that a lot of things cannot be achieved in real life or, whatever reasons. So what are the things which you as a writer keep in mind while writing horror, the challenges which you might face in VFX as compared to fantasy genres or any other one?
See, for me, it was so difficult also because I was also the creator showrunner of this, and I was doing it for the first time. And when I was writing it, I just thought it's someone else's problem, and I thought, oh, I have no VFX in this. So, even while budgeting and everything, the shock came when we were like, oh my God, all of this is going to be Phantom. And so I'll tell you, you have the idea of VFX that people have generally is, like you said, the two genres, like action, which is like, okay, big drama, big, blowouts, there's fire, there are crashes, all of that. You have fantasy where you have creatures, you have a world that you're making. There is a suspension of disbelief. In horror, at least for me, because I make and I write a more rooted, raw, visceral kind of horror that is that has to be believed. If the believability of that horror doesn't work, then nothing else works. So VFX has to basically just aid. It actually has to hide itself very, very. There is no show off in that kind of VFX. You have to be sublime, you have to be subtle, and that horror has to integrate. This is a story about a woman coming psychologically undone. So what is the space that she occupies? How much of the entity do you see, and when do you see? What is the texture of this entity? What is the texture of this disturbance you are seeing in that room? It has to match with what the character is going through. So for me, I think the first meeting that we had with Shekhar was so interesting because he had read the screenplay and he kind of understood. And for me, that was like the biggest thing, that if you've read and you've understood what is between the lines.
So Shekhar, you've handled the VFX of Khauf, your studio, PhantomFX. So do you think that writers discuss with the VFX team or studios initially before they come, and how much discussions happened with the VFX team and the writer before executing the project?
See, as he said, when we first met, I read the entire script. The script was so beautiful. I was able to visualize it. I was able to visualize the character. Obviously, I had a different visualization of my but when you read a script, at times you get lost. But this was the script where I wanted to read more. I am not a good reader. I can write, but I cannot read much. But this was the script where I read it as a binge. When you say binge watching, it was a binge read. So when I met her, I told her, see, this is the thing, this is the thing. And she I guess she was doing the VFX for the first time, Pankaj sir and we met. So she was more curious, ye kaise hoga, and there were multiple discussion, there were multiple fights. So we had good amount of discussion before even shooting it. So suppose there is a shoot after 2 days, we used to sit together. And for me, VFX, I don't like much VFX in a film. In any case, I am a VFX supervisor myself, but I want less VFX. Whatever can be achieved as live, I would always suggest her live only. That's what we always discussed. Whatever is
practical effect, like whatever can happen.
Yes, yes.
Most of the thing can happen on set. Do that first and then come to VFX is what you're talking about.
As she said, VFX is not here to show off. We just did VFX, which makes the fear feel believable. We didn't want to be on the face. When you think about action sequences or a fantasy thing, the people expect a spectacle there. People expect something, wow, kya ho raha hai? But this is the script which I read was, it has to be on the ground. It cannot be that on the face. And the creature also which we created, we had multiple iterations with that, obviously. But that had to be human, that had to be believable. Other than it cannot be that fantasy. We wanted, even you see the series also, it's there when it's needed. It's not there everywhere. Sab jagah ha kar raha ho, aisa nahi hai.
So you said you had multiple fights. Fights on what? Can we discuss that as well?
See, the fights in the sense, without fights, any film or any VFX cannot happen. Because there has to be some creative differences. Now, if we as a VFX house or VFX studio, we always try to bring a director's vision to reality. So what she has visualized, we have to reach there. At times we are going right and she is going left, that time the fight happens. That time we as a VFX house has to explain her, see, this is the thing which I am thinking of. So there can be creative differences and there has to be creative differences. If there are no creative differences, then something is wrong there. Because everybody cannot have the same vision. So that creates something different. And obviously, at the same time, the script and the story has to go forward.
So Smita, when you thought about your characters in the film, I mean the creatures and all that, and when this VFX studios said, let's change this to this because of certain technical issues and all. As a writer, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like, what is this? Like,
It's very interesting that Shekhar brought up the fights because, and also the fact that it had to be a little grounded, the VFX, because when I wrote, there were some outlandish aspects to this. You remember the doctor's thing and all. And when I came, met his team, saw the work, and by that time, some rough cuts were ready. And then I realized that I don't need so much. There is a time when a writer writes out of some kind of insecurity and you feel that people will need more, the executive will need more, the studio will need more. And then when you see the impact of the story and you see that it just needs to integrate, it doesn't need to be so big. So the one thing that first it hit me was that I don't need this, and I didn't know how that would go without it. So that was the first challenge. The other thing was the aesthetic, and where do you want it? There was a point when I saw the pilot and I was like, this is going on for too long without the entity, I found that people were confusing it as a psychological horror. They did not feel the supernatural element of it. And for that, I needed something, with horror, people are watching the screen very carefully because you have to give them a sense that, okay, something is building up and you have to watch it very carefully. You can't be ironing and cooking while watching horror, So you know that something from the screen will jump out. So we found that moment in the middle of the pilot where the idea was that in the corner, suddenly you have the blink of an eye, you have something crawling on the wall and the entity for a split second. Now, whether it was ready or not ready or in which form, that was something we hadn't discussed. But things evolve. When you're in post, things evolve. Sometimes you cut out a lot of things. Sometimes you need a lot of things. And, there was also, if you don't understand the technicality of what kind of work goes into it, then I think the vision wasn't that I want it this way and he wants it this way. It was about planning at what stage do we lock it and at what stage we can't go back. And for me, it was my baby. I think I tortured a lot of people from sound to music to everyone will say that Shekhar's not the only one. But the point was, and I think I remember an appeal that, this will be so good when it releases. So let's just one last ditch. I know you guys have it in you to give me something. And they came up with something so amazing with the entity, and it really worked.
So, as a writer, like Smita again, as a writer, do you think there is a technique, or is there any technique to ensure that fear actually will engulf the viewer in this particular shot or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I did not write jump scares into it, okay? And I remember a lot of back and forth with Prime because they kind of had a problem grasping that this is a horror show and yet it's like something else. So it was so different that I knew I'm going to have a problem with that. But at the same time, the honesty I thought will take it through, because what is it that I am truly scared of? The specificity of a fear. When you go so deep and specific to the fear, it kind of in some ways becomes very universal. What I am scared of, a person walking into a dark alley hearing footsteps, I know that other people will feel that too. And one of the most important people for this show is not here, that is Pankaj. Pankaj is a DOP director and he is superbly talented, and there is a way in which he and his production designer created the kind of mood, they created the kind of walls, they created the kind of claustrophobia, the colors, his framing. I mean, without it, what is Khauf?
So, Shekhar, over to you now. We've heard a lot about the writing part of Khauf and how Smita, thought about it and penned it down on her paper. What techniques we've seen the making, the behind the scenes and the before and after, unbelievable. But so, what tools and techniques were used to execute Khauf, and can you just break down it into smaller pieces, or it's very in a simple word?
Simple, it's basically we stuck to the basics. As I said, I want most of the stuff to happen live. VFX, nowadays people think VFX as a main tool. VFX is just a part of filmmaking process. I love the filmmaking process, so I don't want to break it. So what we did is, like, whenever the scene was visualized, we used to sit. At times there were scenes where the character lifts up and we had animatics made. First we did the animatics, we did the lensing part, then we did the lidar scan of the room also, so that the important part in VFX is to have the scale right. That's the major part. Everybody misses out. Most of the people misses out. It may be due to time or something, but we try to have it storyboarded first, so that we know exact what shots we are taking. We did the animatics, then we shot it exactly how we visualized it. Obviously there will be some marginal differences here and there. Post that, execution also was the same, because we always knew what we wanted in that room. So the execution was smoother that case. Obviously while executing it, we realized, okay, we can have a black energy like this, we can have something like that. We had concepts made so that we do not go back and forth much. As she said, see, for Smita ma'am and Pankaj sir, sometimes the director or they may not realize that this is a stage-wise approval. We always have VFX will always happen stage-wise. So that's a process, and that should always be there, because every stage when you show, you get to understand, okay, now this is going somewhere else, or it's going in the right direction. That's the way we went from, normally we approach every shot.
And now that AI is, there everywhere, I mean, sure, you guys must have used the traditional method to achieve a lot of things, like you talk about LiDAR scanning, a lot of prep on the scene, animatics and things like that. Was AI also used?
No, AI wasn't used in this.
In this, yeah. But what do you think about the AI tools? Like, things will make it move faster in future?
Yes, obviously. As a VFX industry, it's a 26th year I am in. So I have seen this industry evolve from multiple tools coming in. This is a kind of a tool which has come in to help VFX. Currently, yes, it's not that, it will take some time. Currently, it helps in experimentation, as in conceptualization, visualization. Earlier, it is to take us 2 days, 3 days. Now it gives us 8 to 10 options in some time. But for me, it still lacks the soul, heart, which is required in VFX and filmmaking. That I don't think so I will ever have. But yes, when it's embedded in the software, when it's there in your software you use, it will save your time. Whenever technology evolves, I am up for it.
So it will always be a supportive tool for your
100%,
traditional
100%.
workflow. And, yeah.
Currently the thing is which is happening on social media is generative AI, which is fine to have. Wow, kya acha lag raha hai.
Or short forms and
For
reels
short
and
form
things
is
like
fine, but yes, I'm sure it will evolve. There will be a time where the standalone shots may use AI, but to get it embedded into VFX, it will take some time.
that. So, for many years we've seen horror, very hardly any horror film releasing in a year. Or maybe in 2 years there were no good horror films, like, that way. There were genres where there were Ramsey brothers who used to make horror regularly. I used to enjoy it a lot. I don't know whether kids were born that time, but there used to be a frequent horror film releasing every year, but lately then it got stopped, it became extremely niche. I don't know why. Maybe they thought that it is the most difficult genre to create. If audience is not getting that fear in them, then there's no point. So, but after OTT, we saw that horror has come back again. Every now and then we see a new horror film, and it's good. So, do you think, Smita, after the OTT, has horror become the mainstream again, or will it still be niche as it used to be?
We've had in our, cinema, we always have a phase, So if one thing works, it gets repeated ad nauseum. So you have a phase where there's only romantic films, a phase where there's only action film, a phase where there's only... So I don't think horror as a phase came. But at the same time, I'll tell you something, that horror requires a kind of technical expertise. It requires, you need every thing in your toolbox, cinematic toolbox. You'll need every kind of, you have to be good at sound, you have to be good at post, you have to be good at so many things, your direction, your everything has to be top notch. So actually, craft wise, horror is a very difficult genre to crack, because you really have to get people to feel, they can't move around, and that we haven't had. Even something like, I don't think that horror needs to, all horror needs to be elevated horror, where you're looking at what is suppressed and what is repressed, what is about society or, feminism, or I think even something like Conjuring we haven't done, which is just a sensorial kind of horror. So I think we have just scratched the surface. With OTT, of course, there is a more immersive viewing. I mean, all kinds of stories have become more engaging. The writing is better. You get a smaller screen, but you get a larger canvas, So I think, yes, horror is having a moment, but all kinds of engaging stories are having a moment on OTT. And I think it's really sad that theatrically we haven't been able to do anything about it, because it's one of the most profit-making genres ever, It's so cheap to make a horror. It's just your skill in writing, your skill in direction. It's just something that requires a lot of craft.
And also I feel watching horror in a theater creates even more impact than watching on OTT at home, because there's a lot of distractions, like, you're watching and somebody is cooking, the cooker city. Okay, if it blows on time, then it creates that impact, but otherwise there's a lot of distractions.
Look, and they have made so many sub-genres of horror, there's a slasher, there is this, and it's going Scream 1, Scream 2, 7, Final Destination. You have like so many sub-genres. We've not done anything yet. I mean, there is a lot of scope.
So you've already said that there's a lot of technology which also supports to create that right kind of horror, right? Because there's sound, there is visuals, there is practical effects and things like that. And now technology has become even more powerful. So do you think creating horror will be little easier?
No. I mean, see, by craft, I mean, how do you create that suspense, I don't mean that technologically you have to be really smart, because at least where my stories are rooted, they are raw, and I like a bit of messiness. I don't want things to look the same, and I don't want AI to come in and make everything so slick without imperfections, without our human messiness. I mean, that is like the end of the world for me if that something like that happens. You know, where is the humanity in storytelling?
So can you also evaluate or talk about one particular shot in Khauf which was the most difficult to maybe think of or write and also to execute in VFX for both of you, like, even from the VFX front?
For me, and I think that is the one thing that we kind of had a lot of back and forth. Every time you see the entity, you see very little of him, who's a man, and you expose very little of. And that was the idea because where it is psychological horror, every time the protagonist breaks down a little bit, he becomes stronger, you know. So we don't want to say it, we want to show it, that, you know, when he's becoming clearer and closer to her. So that is something that whether he's reflected, whether he is, can you see the texture of him? So there is a moment in episode 3, the end of episode 3, where Madhu has internally broken down. The city, her life has completely broken her down. She's come from a party and she hears this, that thing. To crack that entire sequence was hard because you had to play with sound. You have to figure where you turn off the music because she can hear something rattling in the room, you know, something is skittering in the room. There is, and that's a scorpion noise, and you know, and you have the slight shaking, thudding of the trunk. And then when she completely breaks down, you have this creature that's coming out, you have her silent terror, and right above her is this entity very close to her face, and he slightly moves, like he can't move a lot. And there is like that entire sequence from being soundless, her breaking down, and him appearing was tremendously important and at the same time difficult. And there, the idea of what we see when we see his face, what is the texture of his face, how much of it can we expose, and what is the expression, I think that was for me very, very important because of what we were building up till then.
For Shekhar?
Yeah, what she mentioned is totally right. That shot took good amount of time because, first of all, as I said, the creature itself was very difficult to crack. Initially, we had Pankaj sir and Smita sir said like we will have some wispy kind of a stuff. Then when the story, when I read the story, then when we were shooting, we had this man gets burnt alive. So that humanness has to be there. So to get the story ahead, we try to replicate that burnt feel, but burnt feel cannot be look like a gore. If you go too hard, it looks gore. If you go too soft, people will feel it like a toy. So that was a tricky portion there. Even the lighting has to be right. So Pankaj sir, as ma'am mentioned that the lighting was amazing. So we had to match that atmosphere. The entire Khauf had a beautiful atmosphere. Every frame looked like, oh wow, yaar, ye kya ho raha hai? So when I was in shoot also, and it took good amount of time to lit also. So for us, it was very challenging us to get that lighting right, get the look and feel right. It shouldn't look like plasticky. And we had good amount of back and forth. When we say fight, it was majorly to get things right. So at times, for us, it looks fine. But when a director or a writer sees it, he or she is not able to get her film, her story out. Then it doesn't make sense for us. For us, as I said, it's all about director's vision, writer's vision. If it's there on the canvas, we are done. I don't care where anybody likes it or not. If my writer and director who believes in us, if it's there, it's there. So for us, that particular moment was, it took good amount of time also. That those shots were taken many back and forths.
Awesome. So the last question before we get into some Q&A is, do you think projects like Khauf will impact the Indian horror genre?
Definitely. See, horror genre, as ma'am mentioned, it has multiple sub-genres. But if good writing can make such a beautiful project, if you see this web series, this is a series which I can see multiple times. The writing, from the base itself, it has a strong base. So horror genre, and nowadays people think about horror genre is just a jump scare, just a sound here and there. I have seen many films like that. But this has changed it. People are now OTT, due to OTT, people are now exposed to Korean horror, Now the taste has changed. People are accepting different stories. People are trying to adapt to that. Earlier to just Ram say, oh, something that the music which happened, people thought this is horror. But now horror has changed. It has stylized. When you see Khauf, you will understand how good writing can make a good horror. So I'm sure this has changed.
Smita, for you?
Yeah, I think, what you need overall for horror or for anything to work, the a voice, a voice and someone who's willing to really go by the genre conventions. I mean, there are some genre conventions that are necessary for horror. Khauf may look different, but the idea was always, to kind of get people to feel the horror and the dread. For that, of course, I mean, there's so many horror films that I studied for that. So I think one, understanding the genre of horror and why it clicks and what kind of horror you are making is very important. And I think, we are ready for a different voice. So that I'm very excited about. That now after horror, this kind of horror, people say, yeah, we can go to so many places with this,
And I also hope that people don't really carry the fear when they go to any hostel or any other room. But yeah, I mean, this has
That hostel was scary.
That hostel was absolutely. So I travel a lot and I even stay in hotels. So after watching this, I was actually, when I enter the hotel, I have this first fear of, I make sure everything, I check everything, I don't get, but yeah, what if it comes out after I sleep? So anyways, Namita, do we have time for some questions?
I have so many questions to ask.
You have questions? Yeah, there is
Yeah,
one.
we have time for one question.
Okay, we have one question for a lucky winner.
Lucky.
Yeah.
So I have noticed that the horror genre in India, like I saw this VFX breakdown, which is phenomenal, absolutely amazing. I have recently watched films which are different, such as Hereditary, Barbarians, Weapons. They are like another level. We can't compare to them like the traditional jump scare type horror scenes which we have seen in different ones. Which I pointed out in this is really phenomenal. So hats off to that for bringing a shift to the traditional horror scene in India and going towards more of the level where writing creates a scene of suspense, something different, which I really want to watch this when I go back home. First of all, I really appreciate you, ma'am and sir, for trying to bring a good initiative. So secondly, my question was to you, ki, as a VFX supervisor or as a VFX artist, like for nighttime scenes, where we see like the lighting is very dim and very low, and the focus needs to be particularly on the creature itself or the main element of which creates a horror. So how do we achieve that in a way that scares the audience as well as the audience can see that as a thing which is scaring them, and yet not make it like, "Arey sab andhera mein dikh raha hai, kya chal raha hai?" It's like, sir, I hope you get my question.
See, it's a very simple technique. We normally, when we shoot, we don't shoot it dark. Okay, we shoot it open with good highlights. So then when we make it darker, it's done in DI. So there's nothing like we shoot it dark. Normally also there's a day to night scene which we do. That's the reason all the DOPs will normally, when there's a evening scene, they will shoot slightly 1 hour earlier. Or even when we shoot night scene, it's good lit scene. You will have the rim lights, you will have the highlights. It's all the lighting play. Then when it happens in DI, we can lift it up so that the details are there, but they are not on the face. So majorly the lighting is important in that. And when we add some element in VFX, we match that lighting. And obviously it has multiple back and forths. If any element is added, we go and check in the DI. If it's not visible, then again we lift it up.
So like the pipeline is fitted and the workflow is done according to the DI in such scenes.
Yeah. See, this is not the first time we are doing this. This is from the ages. Because when you shoot it in night, you have a chance of getting all the details missed out. At times it's just flat. So that's where Pankaj sir and DOPs come into picture, where they know how to lit it. It's not just the rough lit there.
Thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for such
Pleasure,
a wonderful
pleasure.
session.